So this is our basic agenda for today. We're just gonna do some questions and review, talk about a little bit what we talked about last time. Then we're gonna really get into thinking skills or lagging skills. We have a little group exercise, and we'll talk about some dead-end exclamations and wrap up. That's about it. So have you guys been doing any thinking, since we talked last week? Have you thought about youth in your home or youth that you have worked with, like using the lens of CPS? Has it changed any way that you've thought about kids or anything like that?
For me, it really stuck on me when you guys talk about kids can do good when they know it or when they have those skills. And sometimes it's hard to grasp that because we know some of the kids that can do really, really, really good. Mm-hmm. And then there's times that they're like a totally different child and they choose not to. Mm-hmm. Use those certain skills. Mm-hmm. Not that they don't know how to connect it, but sometimes you're thinking, well, they do know how to do this stuff, but then they choose this time not to do it. So why is that not connected?
Yeah, and I think that we'll, as we go on, and especially with today when we talk about lagging skills, is that there are times when, like we're set up and we're able to do, do the skills that we can, but there are times that, well, you'll see a trigger or antecedent or something that happens before where we kind of lose the skills. And sometimes we'll have those skills even if we are triggered. It's just about, we're trying to, figure out so it's all happening at all times. Did you hear that, Margaret? No.
And she did an example of how when she came in and she knew the code, but she forgot it and she was in that moment.
Yep.
But sometimes we don't even see the kids in that stress moment.
No, we don't
They're
know.
really calm and it's like, wait a minute, there wasn't even any red flags first before it got to that.
We have, a lot of you know Lisa Rebels, I think.
Yes.
She's been a parent forever, and some of you even know the girl that, well actually this is a different girl.
I know the new girl.
She gave an example yesterday. This girl doesn't have a lot of language ability and is very DD, so it's hard to know if she's even understanding what Lisa and Vince are saying. And Lisa was giving an example yesterday about how this girl, you can try to look for patterns in what's going on, but because she's not verbal, it's like one day brushing her hair will not be an issue, and then the next day it's an issue, and they can't figure out why. And it's great because we want them to be thinking about and trying to figure out why. That doesn't make it any easier, just wanting to isn't enough.
Yeah. And so we'll be doing today some explanations behind that, and we'll get to like how we can, quote unquote, drill down and work a little bit further with that as we kind of go through this course, if that makes any sense.
Anybody else have any thoughts about, the philosophy over the last week, like thinking about kids a little differently or maybe struggling to make sense of it?
Yeah. Like, is it a bit challenging for anyone?
It was super challenging for me, but it also gave me some peace of mind. Like, we were really struggling with our, she's been with us 2 months now, but what kept playing over and over in my head was, at this time, she doesn't have the skill set. Like, even though she's demonstrated it before, and she doesn't have the ability to do that right now. And so it allowed for, what it allowed for is different questions for me. You know what I mean? Like, you seem really stressed out. Do you want to use a coping skill, or do you want to talk about what's so hard right now? Instead of in the past, it's been like, you've done it before. What's up? You're not
trying hard enough. No, that's excellent. That's kind of where we want you to go. And of course, it's going to be hard. We understand. And if some of you aren't quite there, that's okay too. Just be like, everything we learned sounded great, and then I left class and it didn't make any sense because I'm dealing with these kids running in circles around me or whatever. So that's a really good example. Thanks. Anybody else?
How about like with Matt? He's with his autism, where it's not a red flag. It's just him not being able to. Like one day he does it, and the next day he doesn't do it, or he doesn't understand, and one day he does. It's kind of hard because it's just, you don't know where he's at. It's not anything that was triggering
so
him.
It's unpredictable.
It's just his.
So is part of it like, are you saying like, there's outside things that happen to us that trigger us, and then some stuff is just inside us, like we're just in that mood, or like teenagers, classic, right? Like they're just having a bad day, and so.
Well, some are born with it, and like autism,
when do you know when he connects and when he doesn't connect, and Well, I'm still going to that class, so I'm learning more about that, but it's still kind of hard because it's, you know,
Well,
you're wondering
I
about-
would argue, and we're gonna talk about this later when we get into what we call dead-end explanations, like, even if somebody has like autism or something they're born with, or even like a broken leg or something, maybe that's not well, if they have like a physical ailment, like they are missing a limb or something, and so they're limited in what they can do. You know, that tells us that he has some characteristics. We can kind of expect him to have difficulties, you know, in certain lagging skills, but there's still going to be something that's making it harder one day to the next, if we know that he can use it sometimes and not other times.
Well, you know,
Does that make
in the
sense?
class, the parents that, with the children that have autism, that's what they say every day. It's like one day one thing will work, the next day it won't, you know, they blow out, and it's just like every day is different. So how do you teach a kid, so I brought up the question, so how do you teach a kid if you always have to do different things all the time? And you know, you can be open and just try everything. And they've had parents there that said they tried everything over and over again, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. You just have to have the patience just to, you know.
We were talking about this DD girl that the Rebels have just yesterday in class, and how she won't eat anything with mayonnaise on it. I mean, that is a setup for like a total blowout. It's a sensory thing. She doesn't like the taste and feel and everything. So obviously as parents, they could just say, well, we won't put mayonnaise on anything, you know.
Right.
But you go to a restaurant, there's mayonnaise on the hamburger or whatever, you know. So we're not trying to teach her to like things with mayonnaise on it. What we're trying to teach her is that if something happens that makes her upset, how is she going to handle it, and maybe build the skills to say, I don't like that sandwich, it has mayonnaise on it, instead of like throwing the sandwich.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? I mean, I'm thinking that probably applies. Like,
And-
Matt's always going to have his, you know, strong moments and his weak moments, but how is he going to handle those weak moments? Is it going to be a tantrum, or is it going to be like, you know, learning some language to talk through it?
Or increasing his sensory threshold, you know, like, and so that's like a skill that can be built. We were also talking yesterday with our classes that, you know, sometimes when someone's lower functioning, like, you know, they're not going to gain the IQ to be like a 21-year-old, even when they're 21. And so it's to make them like the best, like, functioning 5-year-old, 7-year-old, maybe get them to 6-year-old that they can possibly be, like a very expressive, and, you know, so it's like about building those kinds of skills and kind of meeting them where they're at, and like not expecting that they're going to be like at 21-year-old, you know, like within a year or anything like that, but just working with them where they're at, if that makes sense. And it's slow, and I would argue with some of the parents in the class who said that it seems unpredictable, is that when you start looking at tantrums, and Margaret will get into this a little bit, and when you start looking at the upset, although it may seem like, I don't know what's going to set them off, you kind of, when you scratch the surface a little bit, you will see a pattern to it. There hasn't been a time when I haven't seen a pattern, since we've been doing this. There's usually always something, or several somethings that will be a trigger to it. And so it may seem like, no, there's, you know, this is the most unpredictable thing, but it might be like the tag in the shirt, you know.
Right. What
the
clothes
setting,
is
you know,
wearing now.
yeah, like, so it's just like looking at it from various angles, if that makes any sense.
Well, there's one lady that's the oldest, has the oldest kid with autism, but she talks so much you just want to drown her out.
Yeah.
I'm trying to pick up stuff from her because she does talk a lot, and she has a lot more experience than the other families because they have like 7-year-olds, 8-year-olds. But that is annoying, so it's like I drown her out, but I have to start listening to her. Yeah.
She's challenging your
Yeah,
skills a little bit.
so, I mean, and that's,
And that is important.
it's
She
difficult,
pointed at me.
but it's really meeting people where they are at, so.
And we're going to get into the specific lagging skills and what they look like in detail. And I definitely want to talk about your autistic kid, because you're going to see him here. You'll see it. Okay. So we should probably jump in unless anyone else has any thoughts. And you can also share as we go. So once again, just a reminder, we are looking at lagging skills is part of the beginning assessment phase. Like as we talked about last week, right? We have sort of 3 phases to collaborative problem solving, where we try to figure out what the kid is all about, and then we do some planning around knowing what we know, how are we going to address the problems that we see, and then we actually address them using our plan. And then what we learn here is gonna go into, you know, like now we've learned he doesn't like that tag on his shirt, so we're going to adjust things and just keep going around the circle. So we're gonna start looking at these assessing pieces. And our mantra for today is that behind most challenging behavior is some kind of unsolved problem and some kind of lagging skill. And yes, it might be rooted in some sort of disorder or, you know, mental illness or genetic thing. I mean, but the bottom line is there is challenging behavior, there is an unsolved problem, and there is a lagging skill. That's what we see. That's why our kids are with us. So, basically, behind every challenging behavior is either a trigger, a lagging skill, or both. Okay? Children with challenging behavior often look the same on the outside, but the causes may be different on the inside. No two kids are the same. Let's say you have two kids in a home, and they're both screaming and yelling, being rude, and their behavior looks the same. Like, I've got these two boys in placement, and they're just oppositional. They just are always wanting to fight. Well, chances are the trigger and the lagging skill behind that behavior might be totally different depending on who those kids are. Does that make sense? Okay.
They're like our own children. They come from the same mom and dad, and
Yeah.
they have the same stuff, but they're in.
Yeah, how come you get it and you don't? And what sets you off? Like, I'm thinking about two boys you had that were sharing a room that went head to head constantly. And when I practiced Plan B on one of them, it turns out his trigger was that the other boy was putting his shoes on his side of the closet. You know what I mean? It's like something very specific for each child. It's so funny to
They still trigger each other.
I bet they do. They always will because
Yeah.
they have the same lagging skill, actually.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a funny. But you guys understand that, so I don't go too much further into that. So let's talk about triggers. Triggers are people, things, or events that cause the child to be upset and show challenging behaviors. Common triggers are bedtime, food, screen time, or phone time, or TV,
Yes,
video
time.
games, family
Facebook.
contact, or issues around family, like being
Yesterday,
around bio kids, or you know, using the words mom and dad, anything.
yeah, yesterday
having
we
to
talked
do
about like
with family.
relationships, like just building relationships in general,
Mhm.
being a trigger too.
Exactly. Bathing, hygiene, homework, school in general, changes to any kind of routine that they were expecting. These are so common. They're almost like automatically on our service plans. They're so common. Any of that sound familiar? Do you have an example? Anything not on the list that you've seen on a regular basis?
Tommy used to get so pissed
Yeah.
off at Ryan when Ryan would call me mom. She's not your mom.
Yeah, exactly.
Top of his lunch.
Yeah, it's a huge thing, you know?
That's so funny.
Saying no, that has come up every
It's
class
every
that
time.
we've done. I'm gonna actually add that on here.
And authority figures in general has also been a trigger too.
So, let's see, this thing I think I already said. So lagging skills are the reasons why some things are harder for children to handle than other things. So common lagging skills behind the challenging behavior are inflexibility, poor boundaries, going 0 to 100, awkward social skills, trouble with words, trouble putting things into words, when you're trying to figure out, you know, what it is that you want. You know, what does the child want? They can't tell you. So basically, it's an endless cycle of triggers and lagging skills going back and forth, causing each other, you know, does that make sense? Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the tantrum. So what happens when a kid is triggered and starts showing their lagging skills? You're going to see a tantrum, which is awful, and yet it tells you so much about the child's triggers and lagging skills. That's where you're going to get the clues, okay? We start to notice patterns, and in CPS we want to notice patterns. We've actually written this into the new service plans. If you haven't seen the new goals yet, you will soon. There's a permanent goal about noticing triggers and patterns within your child, because that's going to help us. That's you contributing to the assessment part, so that we can create service goals around the kinds of things you're seeing all the time. What is setting him up? Like it's one thing to hear, okay, yeah, he's having 5 tantrums a day. You know, we have these goals that are about like, will not have tantrums 5 out of 7 days a week or whatever. We want to get more specific than that now. We want to know the who, what, where, why, and when about the tantrums. Because that's how we're going to figure out what's triggering them, and that's how we're going to figure out what skills we need to help them build so that they won't react that negative way when they're triggered.
And we will,
And maybe remove some of the triggers or
Yeah.
help them adjust so that they're not triggered anymore.
and we, just to let you know, like, so for the people who like, are like, I don't know, it seems like it's random and all the time or whenever, we're gonna go through the process that will help us figure out maybe what the triggers might be if we don't have an idea now, or if we don't have a clue to what's going on quite yet, just see. So.
Yeah, next
Future.
week in depth, we're gonna do that kind of detective work. So, lagging skills. Most of you, I think, have had an introductory training in this, so you know there's 5 basic categories within this model of CPS. There's executive skills, language processing skills, cognitive flexibility skills, emotional regulation skills, and social thinking skills. And basically these are the Think Kids terms, that what they're labeling very common human behaviors that we all have. And our kids have them magnified times 100, you know. But it's just like big words for everyday kind of problems and skills that
Yeah.
people have and how they think.
And so last week when we talked about looking at lagging skills like a learning disability, we can look at these like as the domains that that would be like considered like learning disabilities or things that are struggles for the kids that we work with. And so Margaret's going to go into more detail about the specifics of each category, so hopefully we'll have a pretty good grasp on what that means instead of just executive.
Right, what does that mean? Yeah. I know, I always think about that.
I always.
Okay, so executive functioning skills. In layman's terms, these basically have attention, memory, organization, those kind of things. So somebody that has these skills will have an easy time going from one activity to another. They can pay attention, they can sustain attention, they can do things in an orderly, logical manner. They can do more than one thing at the same time. They can juggle multiple thoughts. They can come up with a range of solutions to a problem instead of just being like, well, all I can figure out is this one thing is going to work. That's the only idea I have, and that's what's going to work. What you might see in a child or person that's lacking these skills, or lagging these skills, is that they have problems shifting gears from one thing to another, and that could be in thinking or in actual activity. Like, I can think of a boy that many of you know who wouldn't stop playing video games until the game was over. Like, even if he had to go to the bathroom, he'd rather pee his pants than stop the game. That's kind of an executive functioning skill where he was just like, I can't transition from one thing to another without a lot of difficulty. These kids will also automatically respond no to things. They have a difficult time with cause and effect. Like, my behavior caused this thing to happen. You'll see disorganization, and you will see some impulsive decision making. They're not thinking things through before they just act. So, any of these sound familiar to any of you?
And with the disorganization, that isn't just like they have a messy room. It's like they have problems doing things in a prescribed order or order that makes sense. Like a basic task, like making an omelet, like that might be difficult because like the kid forgets to crack the egg or something like that, and stuff like that is what disorganization can cover as well.
Go clean your room. What does that mean to a kid that doesn't have these skills? Go hang up the clothes. I don't have any hangers. Like, that's actually a classic example of executive functioning skills. The foster parent, you may remember this example from last week. Foster parent told Ryan, go in your room and clean it. Start by hanging up the clothes, then make your bed, then do this and that. And he's like, a squirrel. Like, what? Like, he's not tracking any of that, okay? So he goes in and he goes to hang up the clothes, and he's like, I don't have any hangers. Oh, well, my only solution is I'm not going to do any of the chores. I don't even remember the other things I was asked to do. So I'm just going to sit and play with my toys until she comes in and gets mad. So we know, there are a lot of these lagging skills that popped up in that situation, right? First of all, he would need to have organizational skills, right? So like, a more effective way to help him with this would be to have like maybe a checklist of all, okay, here's what I mean by cleaning my room. Here's what I mean by hanging up the clothes. And if you don't have the supplies you need, come and get me. And I'll check off each thing as you do it and then send you back in for the next. I mean, they just may need extra accommodations to get through that task. Does that make sense?
I mean, one of the things that comes to mind is Netflix, the one that she had, was Olinda, I remember, and we kind of laughed at it, we didn't laugh in front of her, but we thought it was kind of funny. But she had asked him to look for his shoes and he couldn't figure out how to look under the bed. So he stood up and went forward and looked between his legs to look underneath the bed because he couldn't figure out how to look underneath the bed first.
Did he fall down?
No, he was
No, he did this. No, he went like this, right? It says, go and look under the bed to see if there's any dirty clothes, right? So he sat on the floor and laid back and turned his head. And then I just went like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm looking for clothes. I'm like, okay. Are you sure there's none underneath? And so I sent him back, right, and he did it again. Sat back and then looked at him like, okay, and I'm holding my laugh, right? So
Range of solutions.
So then, and then I told him, okay, look at the head of the bed. So he turned around, the head of the bed is over here. He turned around, looked in between his legs, and I'm like, what are you doing, Ryan? I'm looking at the head of the bed. I'm like, okay. Okay.
So, he's like, that's the secret.
That was my
Kids do
funny
well if
moment.
they can.
But you're like, really?
Well, exactly. It's kind of like, you really don't know better. He really didn't know better.
Well, he didn't get in trouble. I just laughed.
No,
It's
of
funny.
course. But, you know, I mean, that's a great example. Thank you for that. So, yeah, that's kind of what executive functioning skills are about. And somebody who's autistic or has ADHD or has whatever diagnosis under the sun you want to name may have some of these issues. But we're looking at these issues, not at the diagnosis. Does that make sense? So what if he has ADHD or autism? That's all fine and good. We want to look at the actual behaviors we're seeing in the home and do something about it. And medication might help if somebody is ADHD, you know. Maybe a pill will help them reach a baseline where they can. They're not so struggling so hard in some of these areas, but it's not a solution for building skills.
Yeah.
Okay.
And really just keep in mind, I mean, executive function skills, just to reiterate, they would have to do anything with attention and numbering. So that's important as well.
Yeah. And when we're doing our exercise later, we're kind of going to look at this kind of simple explanation of like, well, is that where we're seeing the problem? So, language processing skills is the next one, and this has to do with talking, hearing, and actually understanding the content of what is being said. Okay, so somebody with these skills is able to put their thoughts and needs into words. They're able to understand what you're saying when you say clean your room. And not just organizationally speaking, but like they know what you mean by certain things. They can pinpoint their feelings and frustrations. They can be expressive. They can label and categorize their emotions. In somebody that doesn't have these skills, you may ask them a question and they don't respond at all. Or they say, they stare at you. Or they say, I don't know. I'm thinking of a kid you had a couple of years ago, Stefan, who was, he was a big, I don't know. And I think he probably had some lagging skills in this area. There may be a delayed response, like I ask Anna, well, what did you think about class yesterday? Hello.
That was pretty good.
It takes her a minute, you know, or maybe she'll fumble over the words a little bit, like,
Yeah.
oh, well, you know, there was that one, and then, I don't know, you know, kind of bumbly talking like I'm doing right now. And then also using the same words over and over again. We have a woman in one of our other classes who has a girl who, when she gets upset, she'll say things like, I need to call Dana, I need to call Dana, I need to call Dana, I need to call Dana. Or you may have had a kid that's like, F you, F you, F you, F you, F you. That's all they can think to say. And there's so much else going on in their head that they need to express to you, but they're stuck in just, I don't know, those are my go-to words.
Or
right
even
now.
like I don't want to go to school. school, and like, even if you told them, you know, it's okay, we don't have to go to school, I don't want, no, you're gonna make me go, like that sort of thing, when they get stuck in that loop, that's a good example too. And then I was thinking about, Ryan, cause like when you say anything to him, like oftentimes he'll take a moment and he'll like kind of look at you quizzically, and then maybe respond.
He actually like checks out for him.
Yeah.
We've had a number of like school personnel, therapists, all kinds of people have
You know
brought
what I
that
thought,
to our attention.
after I read the book, what I thought it was, you know how it says in the book where the kids kind of have like an out-of-body experiences because they can't handle what it is, so they just,
disassociate, yeah.
they just go away? I think that's what.
It's trauma, it's related
Ryan
to
was
trauma.
doing that.
It's called disassociating, and you actually, like, yeah, you pop out of your body. Exactly. So, excellent.
He doesn't do that anymore.
Anyone else have any thoughts about language processing? Okay. So, emotional regulation skills, and this one's pretty easy to detect, where some of the other ones are a little bit like not obvious. This one's pretty obvious. This is about ability to keep calm, cool, and collected. Okay, so if you have these skills, it's easy for you to stay calm, think clearly, whether you're having some big thing like coming at you, making you upset, or whether you just have a lot of little things stressing you out. So it's the ability to handle chronic frustration and to be rational under stress. Like when the alarm went off in the building last week, I was not able to be rational under stress. I was like running up and down the hall and looking for the code and messing up all the papers, you know, like, no, come on. The calm Margaret knows where that code is and can go and get it. So yeah, I have issues in this area, I will own that. So what you might see if these skills are lagging is somebody going 0 to 100 when they're frustrated, okay? You will also see chronic irritability, like all the time, just little things. They can't handle any kind of stressors. You may see anxiety and even like isolation. This can be a kid that hides in their room and like self-harms and cuts on themselves and doesn't want to talk and shuts down. Or it can be the opposite. It can be a kid that's throwing chairs and screaming and yelling, punching and kicking and biting. Basically, the way I like to think of it is it's a battle between heart versus head, and heart wins and head turns off. Okay, so I'm sure that sounds familiar to most of you because I think 99.99999% of our kids have this issue or have lagging skills in this area. So, on to cognitive flexibility, and this is where I think, Rosalinda, you're going to see your autistic kid. This has to do with being flexible and going with the flow. If you have these skills, you can handle unpredictable situations. If you don't have these skills, you want things to be the same every single time, okay? This is about thinking outside of the box, being flexible, and being able to see the big picture instead of the details. So when these skills are lagging, you get somebody that engages in what we call black and white thinking, which you can also think of as all or nothing thinking. Everybody hates me. Nobody likes me. You always do that. Or we never do this. Or it has to be this way. You know, that kind of extreme thinking.
You promised chicken tonight.
Yeah. We always eat at 6 o'clock. Like, it really doesn't make sense to them if you don't eat at 6 o'clock. No matter that in the big picture, life happens and like there was a traffic jam on the way home and we didn't have the right ingredients for the thing we wanted to make or whatever. Doesn't matter to them. We eat at 6 o'clock. I can't handle it. I can't understand why we're not. These kids and people fixate on rules and routines. Like I said, dinner's at 6 or like Liddy, you had a kid a long time ago who, yeah, exactly. You could set your watch, 7 o'clock he's gonna have his tantrum. He knows the routine in the house to a T. And he would, like before his, I think it was the bath or the, whatever, the shower that triggered him maybe, I can't
No,
quite
I
remember.
would give him melatonin and everybody would leave the house because we knew that that was gonna be the time where he was gonna have a fit. So
It
we
was
knew
like
within
a bomb.
15 minutes, yeah.
Like ticking down,
Yeah.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, which it was sort of this combined with emotional regulation and some other lagging skills too, but definitely you could set your watch to when this kid was going to blow. So also struggling with unplanned changes, like Tommy, God forbid, one time we took a different route to your house from the Boys and Girls Club, and that was the end of the world. It was like, we don't go this way. Where are we going? You know, he didn't understand. Or like, we have to stop at the, Elijah and his dad's real go with the flow, and Elijah's real not go with the flow. I remember him telling a story about how they stopped at the store to get milk on the way home, and that was a tantrum because that was not planned.
Yeah.
If you had just told him, we're gonna make a little stop on the way home later, like tell him in advance, you might be able to reduce that stress, you know, but that kid was very much set on his own timer too. There's also that distorted thinking, kind of like I said, the extreme thinking of like everybody, you don't like my shoes.
I mean, everyone hates my
I
shoes.
have terrible taste in shoes. You know, like just this broad kind of broadening things. Or you corrected something I said in a slide, so therefore,
I'm so stupid.
oh my God, she thinks I'm not a good facilitator and she should do these classes by herself. You know, just kind of making it very extreme like that. And then perseveration, which is like, kind of like what we talked about with language processing, where you're just repeating over and over, like stuck on an idea, can't let go.
I like to think of
Gavin
like
does this all the time.
like the worry loop. Like, you know, like have you ever seen like kids get stuck in like a worry, like, well, if I don't get to play my Game Boy, then I won't be able to finish the game, and everyone else is gonna hate me when I don't finish the game. And so like it, you know, just like that loop of like they get stuck in this anxiety loop.
Yeah.
That's how I kind of.
And also, it could even be like you had an argument, it's over. It's not over for the kid. It's very much still in their head that you said,
Yeah.
you said, and I'm still upset about it.
Yeah, that's a
Even
really
though
good
you've
example.
explained to me, I'm still just, he does that all the time. GN does that all the time.
So we have that problem with Mark. If he's told to do something, he doesn't do it, all of a sudden I want my back kid and he's crying, he feels terrible about himself.
Yes.
And it's like, I just told you to do it, but I raised my voice a little bit, or I said it in a different way, all of a sudden he like closes down.
And he read all this stuff into it, and it became, he generalized it. It's all good or all bad.
And that also connects with the emotional. You'll see like there will be pieces of the, you know, the lagging skills that will connect with each other. So that one also I say, you know, emotional regulation, because like it's going from 0 to 100 over like, you know, a different tone that you said.
Exactly. And you'll notice a trigger and pattern in there that it has to do with your tone. So you like figure that out, and then you're like, all right, approach him a little different, or I'll get him used to that's how my face is, or whatever. You know, like he thinks I'm angry, but that's just.
And I tell him, I said, I still love you, it is not how I feel about you, but right now this is not okay, and this is why I'm telling you this way. So it's not like you have consequences or in trouble, but I'm calling your attention to it.
Yeah.
It's still hard for him to separate.
Well, and then so the follow-up conversation when he's calm is a great time to be like, remember what we talked about, and now this and that, and you're feeling better, so let me just reiterate, this is why I was telling you those things. So, in terms of Matt, are you seeing him here? Give me examples.
You know, but he's gotten a lot better now. He's a lot better, because before, when the certain things would throw him off, they're not throwing him off as they used to.
Really?
Yeah, but again, it's a lot of work and a lot of consistency with him.
I'm also thinking about kids, and those of you not in the clan probably know this group of families lives close to each other, they're related, and they share a lot of the same kids, so that's why I keep pointing to them. We've actually had kids move from your home to your home because they needed, like, the kids that need tight structure do very well, and it's not that you're not structured, you know, I'm digging myself a hole.
We agree.
Your households have different strengths,
Yeah.
completely, and we figured out that what you were doing just didn't work for this kid who was so fixated on certain things, and so he's done better with you because, well, talk about that, but certain things got
But
better.
he has though, he has. He doesn't see it. He doesn't see it, but he has.
And what happened is we removed some of the layers of chaos that came with like not knowing what time or things were gonna happen and stuff, and there's still plenty of things to work on there, but it did.
And I think letting Alfred read a lot of the signs and they know what to expect at what time, so they'll stop what they're doing to accommodate what his needs are. Because they know if they don't like the sleeping pattern, if it goes over, they know it's gonna be a really hard time. So they're stopping what they're actually doing to make sure he gets that
And
sleep.
he doesn't realize we've changed our whole household to accommodate him. But he does not, you know, he doesn't know or realize or sense that, you know, that we've changed the
Right.
time, you know, the bedtimes, everything. We've done everything to accommodate his needs,
Wow.
you know, but he won't ever recognize.
And I think that has to do with lagging skills too, which brings us to our next category actually, where I think, so social thinking skills have to do with relating and interacting with other people. So that particular youth is extremely cognitively flexible. He also has extreme lagging skills in social thinking. He has no idea how his actions affect other people. He just doesn't get it. He can't put himself in other people's shoes. And that's part of this lagging skill, where people that have skills in this area are able to read social cues. Like here I come, I'm standing so close to Anna, and she's backing up, and I'm just like, what, friend? Stay with me, you know? Like, but we're friends. But you know, I'm not getting it, and then I'm hurt, and then if I have cognitive flexibility, I'm like, she hates me, you know? Like I don't understand that it's just a matter of backing up, and if she has language processing skills, she's not going to tell me, Margaret,
And then I
I'd
just
really
like
like you to
punch
back up, you know? And then I
So, see, this is how it happens.
This also has to do with methods of how somebody seeks attention. Somebody in the last class was giving an example of the kid was unhappy, so he would like, and Letty Allen, again, comes out of his room and is like, knocking things on the table, like looking at you, and like, I'm gonna lay on the floor and look at you, right? And like, what do you want? Come on, you know.
Yeah.
My cat, yes, definitely.
Yeah, they were talking about like the teen boys who would, they used to work with the Multnomah County boys who are, you know, coming from the juvenile division, and how they would just like argue the rule. And like, you know, like Lisa or, you know, someone would say like, you know, dinner's gonna be at 5. They're like, why? What's the point of that? Why do we have to, you know, and just like, but it's
Totally interacting.
yeah, so this is the way that they were like that was like, okay, well we had our interaction for the day.
And there was another really good example in class yesterday of someone who, the kid would have a big tantrum and all this stuff, and then like vent all these things to her. But the way of initiating the contact was to have the tantrum and get attention that way, and then she'd be like, so you just wanted to talk? You could just ask me, we can talk. You don't have to have a big tantrum to get my attention, you know what I mean? So that was
No, yeah.
pretty fun. So, also part of this is seeing how we affect other people, okay? And being able to see things from another person's point of view. It's actually a skill. It's not just that they're trying to be mean or uncaring. They can't do it. I mean, think about trauma and having to be self-preserving, right? You're like one of those bugs that curls up like this. It's like, I can't see anybody else. I'm just protecting myself. Also being able to see yourself realistically. We heard some great examples about this yesterday, about some kid who's apparently going to be the next Justin Bieber.
No, Valerie, you have Doug right now, right? So there was one time I was driving Doug in a car, and like some crazy pop song comes on, and he's like, woo, woo, like telling me that he's gonna get American Idol, and like, I know. And he's just like, you know, he's like, Anna, my voice is like so good. I'm so good. And like, I know. And so like I had to like, you know, be like, yeah, you know, it's pretty good, Doug. But he really thinks that, you know, he could be, or at least to this point in his life, that he was gonna be an American Idol, and he was gonna be the next, you know, superstar.
And that's a great example of somebody who sees themselves in a grandiose, positive way. We also have kids that see themselves in that negative way, like, well, nobody likes me. Is that why they gave you all those Valentines in your bags on Valentine's Day? Because they don't like you? You know, I mean, like, they just can't see all the positives either. So it kind of goes both
Yeah,
ways.
sometimes that grandiose thinking is often, you know, because they're pretty insecure, is can be what's going on there. It's like, you know, it's that false confidence that's kind of going on. For the have empathy part, I just want, because like a lot of our kids, this is something that like people get scared of our kids, like they just don't have empathy.
He's a psychopath.
He's a psychopath, he's a sociopath. But like Margaret was talking about earlier, like the bug, you know, like when you've had a lot of trauma and you have to just think of you, it's gonna be very, very hard to have empathy for other people or understand another person's situation. If you think about that, that's a pretty higher form of thought, you know? Being able to put yourself like, how does that make this person feel? Or how, that person must feel sad because I punched them. I know, it seems so basic, but that's something that's very, very difficult. And so we really want to challenge the thought that like kids aren't like, you know, like a psychopath or sociopaths, but this is a skill that can be built.
They're too young for us to give up hope and just say they're totally broken. And I know, I think in this class we talked last week about, you know, there is that prison pipeline, and if you don't nurture and get that love sort of thing happening, they can go down that path and clock out and give up and be like, you know what? Nobody cares about me, so I don't care about anybody else. Got a gun in my hand, I'm gonna do whatever. Like our kids aren't quite there yet. I mean, we do deal with like gang involved youth and stuff, and it's not too late. Like they just need us to help them with this stuff. It's not too late.
One of the kids
you know?
that's in the system right now with us, not in our home, but I did the rest of the one in Austin. We used to talk and talk with him. He's a pretty cool kid, but he feels that he needs to portray this persona of, you know, I'm a badass, because that's how people see me.
Right.
So, you know, he talks about that, and you know, it scares me because when you talk to him about his future, he doesn't see himself anywhere else but in jail. He doesn't see himself doing anything in life. And he's like, wow, you've been in the system so long, nobody's really helped you with your lagging skills to get you ready, you know. I even told him he was saying that he wanted to look for a job, but he couldn't find a job, or he couldn't look for one. And I said, why? He said, because I don't know how to fill out an application. I said, well, bring it, I can help you.
Yeah.
And he said, no, that's mine. I said, no, sweetie, that's not mine. I'm going to show you how to do it. I'm not going to make up a story to make you look like somebody that you don't
I want to
understand.
help you.
Yeah.
You're not doing anything wrong. You
Yeah.
deserve help.
Yeah, so him not knowing that, you know, he can do something, but he just already feels he's fixated in this, I'm not going to be anything. You know, I'm just
Exactly.
going to be like this forever. And
Exactly.
that's kind of sad.
So that kind of falls into this, and it also falls into, I think, the cognitive flexibility issue of like, it's kind of extremes. There's nothing, no hope for me. And not being able to see that. And how can they see that if we're not there to like, point that out and be patient and take our deep breaths. And yes, we all have lagging skills too, but like, we have better skills than they do, I guarantee. That's why they're in our care again, you know, and our hope is they will build those skills and be okay someday, you know. So speaking of that, important, we all have lagging skills. We also all have triggers. You know there's some kids that get to you more than other kids, right? And that's okay. That is totally normal because we're human. We're each a unique mix of all of these strengths and weaknesses too. And it's just important to kind of know yourself and know like, you know, I have a harder time with kids that like are gonna shout in my face. But the cognitively inflexible kids, I love those kids. Like, I know it can be totally a hassle dealing with some of their issues, but like that makes sense to me and I can be patient with that. Whereas if somebody's being like violent, it's a little bit harder for me. So I might have Anna step in and deal with that or help regulate me, calm me down so that I can handle that situation, you know. So that's why we like for you all to have supports and things, and networks of, you know, if you're overwhelmed and that kid is just driving you crazy and whatever, you know, having somebody else.
Yeah, my partner, he is actually becoming an occupational therapist, and one of his favorite things that he likes to do is he's like, I really like it when I'm able to like, you know, get an autistic kid to talk to me. And for me, I'm really sometimes overwhelming for autistic kids. So we talk about like, you know, like if we were ever like to, you know, adopt or foster, like the balance that we'd have to kind of figure out with that. Because he loves like, you know, parallel sitting and trying to figure out how to get them to talk. But I'm just, you know, I've worked mostly like with a lot of teenagers and especially kids in the juvenile system. And so I know how to like get to like the guy who like, totes a gun around at school and like figure out how to, make him cry about mom and, not make him cry, but like figure out.
Break that veneer.
Yeah, break that veneer and figure out what's going on. So it's really about like figuring out where you are at and what skills you have and what skills your partner has and, what skills other people in your house have. One of the things me and Margaret often talk about is that I have some good executive functioning skills, but my organizational skills aren't super awesome, where hers are. But my cognitive flexibility skills, like being able to go with the flow, are higher. So we kind of like work.
Go with the flow.
Yeah, we do that together, like as a team when we, teach parents or get ready or, help organize our systems within the systems to take on the CPS challenge. So
And knowing that about ourselves and knowing that about each other makes it easier to work together. Like, I'm overwhelmed, can you handle this one part? Or, I'll keep track of all the dates and I'll just or whatever, and we get it all done together. And I think you'll find, those of you that have support people will find that you kind of balance each other out in that way maybe too. This might be a good time to take a break before we do the exercise if you want, like maybe what, 5?
yeah, maybe we could come back like 5 to.
Okay, so after the break, what we did was we engaged in a group exercise where we worked on reframing some of the shaming and blaming language that sometimes goes along with the kids in our care. There is a handout that goes along with it. It's entitled Vocabulary Shift. And basically we're looking at terms like manipulative, defiant, oppositional, sneaky, and we're trying to reframe those in terms of lagging skills. So instead of saying manipulative, we might look at the situation in which the child is not getting his or her needs met directly and saying, okay, what skill did they need to be able to approach me directly? Was it a language processing issue? Was it a distorted belief that I might say no? Was it inability to handle me saying no emotionally? So maybe emotional regulation skills. So basically we spent some time discussing youth placed in individual homes, and we reframed some of these dead-end explanations and labels for kids. And then we talked about why we focus on lagging skills. So basically, lagging skills help us remember that a child's challenging behavior is not on purpose. It isn't a choice. There's something more behind it. Lagging skills also help us identify specific skills that need to be trained. So what would this youth need to do better in order to learn how to be honest with me? He might need to learn to think outside the box or look at a range of solutions rather than just thinking, he can't ask me for things. There may be just more to it than that. It also reminds us that rewards and consequences are often a band-aid instead of a cure. So there's more going on under the surface, and we want kids to actually internalize change, and we want to address the skills that are lagging underneath the external behaviors that we're seeing. We don't just want to simply train on the outside. Lagging skills also help us recognize and empathize with the child's difficulties. So if we think about it like, okay, I'm frustrated that this youth is always being quote unquote defiant when I tell him it's time to take a shower. If I think about it in terms of lagging skills, that there's something about the shower that upsets him, and that maybe he doesn't know how to tell me that, or maybe he just doesn't know how to handle he can't figure out that it's maybe something about the soap or something specific. If I can just think to myself, there's something more going on there, I might be actually able to put myself in his shoes and go, you know what, that probably is really hard for him, and he's doing the best that he can. Also, lagging skills help us be patient and realistic about our expectations. So if we know something's hard for somebody, like the example I gave earlier in class, if we know that a youth is disorganized and has trouble staying on task with something such as cleaning his room, we might give him a checklist of
what exactly it entails to clean the room, and we would check each thing off one at a time and kind of, not expect him to just know what we mean and go in and clean everything all in one shot. Also, finally, lagging skills help us explore what's on the inside instead of just what's on the outside. So that kind of ties into the Band-Aid versus the cure. We really want to make sure we're getting to what's inside rather than just looking at the external behaviors and making sure they comply with us. So let's talk for a minute about dead-end explanations. So often these labels are given to our kids, and this is kind of what we did in the exercise by saying, kids are called defiant, kids are called manipulative, things like that. We want to make sure we're kind of avoiding these labels. Like, sure, we get kids that are autistic or have ADHD or have depression, but often that's not enough to really tell us, what we're working with. We may, know that if a child has ADHD, they may have some executive functioning skills. It kind of gives us a hint of what to expect, but it in no way defines who this child is. So examples of dead-end explanations would be, well, he has attachment disorder, she just wants attention, he's manipulative, she's adopted, he has oppositional defiant disorder, she's a liar, things like that. Okay, but so what? So what about that diagnosis? No matter what the cause, we still have a problem to solve. And while some of these labels may describe lagging skills and outward behaviors, such as, if somebody has ADHD, that may tell us they have a hard time concentrating, they don't solve anything. And knowing those labels doesn't teach skills in and of itself. We still need a plan to address the problem. So, going back to session 1 where we talked about our explanation guiding our intervention. If our explanation for a child is that, well, she's bipolar, how does that guide our intervention? What are we working on, that we're going to make her bipolar go away, or that, it doesn't really make sense to look at behavior that way. Instead, we want to look at what lagging skills are we seeing right now? Is this child having a hard time regulating her emotions? So, looking at it that way, we can say, are we addressing a specific problem? Yes, she gets triggered when this and that happens and she goes 0 to 100. So are we acknowledging a specific lagging skill? Yes, we're acknowledging emotional regulation problems. And do we know exactly what we're working on? Yes, we're trying to help her build skills to be able to stay calm in the heat of the moment. So in 6 months, we hope this youth will be better at, going with the flow or staying calm in this particularly triggering situation. Whereas if we were to do this in terms of bipolar, are we addressing a specific problem? Well, she has bipolar, that's a problem, but it's not specific enough. Are we acknowledging a specific lagging skill? No. Do we know what we're working on? Not really. In 6 months, we hope this youth will be better at not having bipolar. I mean, it just doesn't make sense it's not enough to just look at the diagnosis. We want to look at what are the actual behaviors that we're seeing. So it's really about looking deeper and listening closer. Lagging skills and the things that trigger them lead to difficulty meeting our expectations. And if we're mad, confused, disorganized, or uncomfortable, it can be very hard to do what we're supposed to do. That's true for us as the adults who, probably have better skills than the children we're caring for. It's also certainly true for the kids in our care. So that is something we want you to keep in mind, and we want you to prepare for the next session by filling out a Maple Star Behavioral Assessment, which measures lagging skills in detail. You can do this either with a youth in your care or on yourself or on somebody else in your life. Just kind of get a sense of how these works. We'd also like you to spend time over the next week between now and the next class thinking about your children in terms of lagging skills. What are you noticing? And are you noticing triggers and patterns? So that concludes this class session.